will circulate. We will circulate a feedback form that you can return to us, hopefully by the end of the week or very early next week, so that we can hear from everybody who's listening to the presentation and or have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Bernier. And you have to identify yourself, but we will anonymize that afterwards when we circulate it to the search committee. So without further ado, Francois, the floor is yours, and I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay, thanks everyone. It's hope you're hearing me well, and bright and early for some of you, quite late for the folks who got up early. But this is, I think, the best, most amazing position in child health leadership in the world right now. It's a tremendous privilege to be considered for it. I wish we were in person. I think there are good reasons to do these by Zoom, and I think people really do deserve to hear a little bit about the candidate as your director, if they were to be in the position, but also the direction they would go should they have the privilege and opportunity to do so. So I'll try and keep the energy level high and engagement level high, but in particular, I'm looking forward to your questions. So let's make sure we have time for that. We have a culture at the University of land acknowledgement. I think it's extremely important that we do so at the beginning of our significant meetings as a way of reflecting on our ability to thrive and live on these traditional lands. I found that as I did land acknowledgement and do them many times, that the words on this slide don't mean much to me. I'm getting better at pronouncing them, but I understand very little about the First Nations I'm speaking about. And so as a personal process of land acknowledgement, I tend to personalize them when I can. So this is Lake Minnewanka. I have the privilege of understanding sometimes the beauty of these lands through photography. And this was an absolutely stunning night, 360 degrees of just absolutely stunning aurora. The Lake Minnewanka itself, as everyone knows, just sits north of Banff. These are the traditional territories of the Stoney Nakoda Nation. Lake Minnewanka itself is Stoney Nakoda language for Lake of the Spirits. So I take this moment together with you to acknowledge the traditional territories of our Indigenous peoples and how we have this incredible opportunity to live and thrive on these lands. And how do we move forward together in a collective way towards reconciliation is a personal commitment. So I've titled this Onward Together, and if I look and reflect on the current status of our institute, is we have really, really strong documents, guiding documents, including the Child Health and Wellness Strategy. There's strong vision in these documents, for better health and well-being of children, families, communities around the world. One child, every child has one as well. Many of you have them if you lead programs within ACHRI or affiliated programs around what your vision and mission is. At the bottom, we have this statement about fueled by partnerships who drive science innovation to transform health, well-being, and children, families, communities. And these reflect what we are as a research institute. We drive innovations in research and science, and we want to have impact and improve our stakeholders' lives. And for us, that's women and children. It also means to me that we have strong documents, and going forward means that we can strengthen our positions and our path forward based on these documents, that we don't need to reset and go back and reflect and strategically plan our directions. I think we have strong vision, mission. I think we have strong strategic planning. So this is now more, frankly, about at least this perspective I bring to it, and the position I would bring to it is moving forward. So I'll talk about my journey. It's not my favorite space, to be honest with you. I think we all find it hard talking about ourselves, some less so than others maybe, but I do find it difficult. But I think it's important that you understand a little bit about me. I do want to spend the chunk of the time then talking about ACHRI and my perspectives on it, the strengths and what I see as the challenges, but perhaps more importantly, the opportunities and priorities and how we move forward. And yes, at some point there will be a puppet in the road that we'll talk about. As you know, at the retreat, I used Mentimeter. So this slide will come back with a little QR code. If you have a few seconds, grab your phone, grab the QR code. You don't have to grab the QR code now, but what I would like all of us to think about is the question of to whom are we accountable? And I'll come back to the end of this question, and we'll appreciate your thoughts on this. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a Francophone boy growing up in Winnipeg as part of a Francophone community. I didn't really see myself growing up as a Francophone language minority. I went to a Francophone school. My kids and friends on the streets were mostly Francophone. Had a few racial slurs thrown at me involving French fries and stuff, but for most of me, I grew up as a comfortable French Canadian, and now recognize how privileged I was to be able to go to Francophone school. As 12, our family spent a year in Egypt, and my father was on sabbatical working with an NGO. That was a very transformative year for me. I learned a lot. It was a very eye-opening experience to be a young adolescent in just such a rich culture and a very diverse place. Went back to Winnipeg, late high school, went to Les Jeux de la Francophonie. It was a youth Francophone games, 2,000 Francophone youth. Exactly 61 of them white, and was definitely in the minority scenario, but the exposure to the very rich Francophone Black community was just stunning. Every night we had these amazing events, just where countries and communities could express their language and culture, and it's just really transformative again. So back to Winnipeg, medical school, did my medical school elective in actually southern Kenya, doing really immunization outreach to the nomadic Maasai community. So now things get a little bit more complex. Obviously, I go back to Winnipeg. I matched to Calgary. So I've been in Calgary professionally as my whole career. I'm kind of infected by this place in many ways. Infected by the Children's Hospital and the university community here, and have stayed on. Some experiences of travel and some of them quite significant. A lot of work in Tanzania with Amanda Calgrimson Dewey, in particular, very, very young, amazing scholar, Elias Nyanza, who was studying the impact of artisanal gold mining on lakeshore communities in Tanzania and the maternal child health impact of that, of which 50% of the women in the study of over 1,000 women, just stunning work, but sad work in many ways, had an adverse pregnancy outcome directly correlated to maternal levels of mercury and arsenic. But what's evident, these are places where I've traveled or spent significant time, not just weekends and meetings, but very little exposure to Northern Canada, not exposure to big chunks of the world. So, but a privilege to see many of these places. Yes, the academic part, you can look me up. I will highlight, if you didn't know, that I was department head for about a decade and 2 decades as section chief, and those overlapped towards the end, and learned a lot through those years. I learned about leadership, I learned about strategic planning, I learned about addressing challenges, supporting people who are part of your community is your primary goal. How do you work in resource poor environments? How do you work when you have opportunities? And how do you leverage those? But mostly a lot of kind of enabling roles as a leader. And I think we did some great things as a group. I think the department did well. I think the section became known for its ability to innovate and integrate care and research. And so those were really formative years and privileged to have led. I'm a rare disease clinician and spend most of my time at the Children's Hospital or the maternal fetal medicine clinic. These are tough spaces, but they're inspiring places. They teach us about kids and families, the resilience of being a child, but the challenges that women and children face and their families and communities are significant. So they motivate us in a way that is across the spectrum, an incredible opportunity for us as a research institute to think about the impact that we can have by working together, regardless of what role we play within the institute. I taught a lot early, particularly in my career. We always tell protect yourself as a young faculty, and that's true, but I honed a lot of speaking skills early on. How do you present things in genetics that are not Punnett squares and have people blank off and not listen anymore? And so given the opportunity, I worked very, very hard to present a position that is clear, that is engaging, that is evidence-informed. And the same with public speaking. It's not a natural thing for many of us, and I worked very hard to hone those skills, and I think they're important. Academically, we hit an inspiring area in genetics and genomics where the technology change helped us answer many questions for many of the kids and families that we're working on, and developed a really strong national network. Mike Innes, Genomic Harvesting, Ryan and Lon, Deborah Marshall are part of this network, and many others globally, led by Tim Boycott. And we just recently published our 10-year kind of summary of this work, and it's fascinating and humbling and inspiring, actually, as a network that started really with a whole bunch of docs trying to figure out what their families had, and an undiagnosed disease program that built out to a national network. One of our outcomes is over 1,300 families as part of an arm of the study, of which 60% now had a diagnosis. You're returning those. But the bigger part of it is that you build infrastructure, you build capacity, you build mechanisms of research, approaches to solving problems. And that spawned out a number of grants across Canada. Ours was called Tiger, a $6 million Genome Canada grant. So myself, Dennis Bowman, our receptors were actually Alberta Precision Labs. So we were working directly on behalf of APL with many of the same people I mentioned. So Deborah Marshall, Ryan Manjul, and Barbara Singh, the lab directors, and many staff, to translate our knowledge in the discovery space to clinical applications. So we have now validated testing, exome and genome sequencing in-house. We have pipelines to report. We have pipelines to integrate that data into our research pipelines. And those labs are now working together for national impact. So we're funded by Genome Canada under a project called All for One, Canada's Precision Health Partnership, to have all the diagnostic labs in Canada who are part of these GAP grants sharing clinical data across provincial boundaries. Think about how hard that is to do. I think we have memorandums of understanding of how we would do that. But the integrating research component is that all these patients are consented for recontact into a national registry that would have their data and their availability to drive research, to participate in research as a national platform. We're going to soon launch the Canadian Rare Disease Network that's coming out of support from One Child, Every Child as a national platform. And then the legacy of Genomics for RD, which is our informatics platform, 5,000 genomes are sitting in this with the ability to push any of those results to international networks. So it's the type of research that was inspiring. It's difficult, but it's all team-based. And you need to bring groups together with diverse areas of expertise to solve these problems. You can look me up, Google Scholar me if you want. You'll see the range of publications I have. Would encourage you to also look up at the Care for Rare as a separate kind of publishing entity. We have an author called Care for Rare, and I think it's important for us to think about different ways of reflecting contribution to networks and how that is recognized as your scholarly contribution, and then the grants on the right. And obviously I'll come back to talk about the CPREP grant, which is just an incredible opportunity and privilege to have been part of. So through the spirit of leadership and research, it started brooding a lot about science and how you did science at scale and what were the components of an effective research ecosystem. And I actually found this slide recently, and it was 2015, so it feels a long time ago now, where both to the Cummings School of Medicine, but also ACHRI, we're starting to develop these concepts of cohorts, innovative science, platforms of analytics, innovative evaluation, and then translating to outcomes. And I think if I have this right, Gerald, and teams, the yellow highlighted things here were actually potential positions in the P25 scope. So how did those positions fit into enabling a research environment? I guess if you start drawing pictures, people ask you to draw more pictures. So I was asked on behalf of the deans and the Alberta Academic Health Network to co-develop a precision health strategy for the province. And again, I think looking at the international landscape, the strengths in Canada, the strengths we had locally, what perspective could we bring to a shift from thinking about medical approaches to precision health, but precision health and wellness in the context of wellness and disease prevention, early diagnosis, prognosis, targeted interventions, and shifting that cost curve. This also highlighted in many ways a lot of stuff we were all feeling, and many of you have felt, that the solutions are not one or the other. We need both. We need to think about those intrinsic factors that impact health and omic side really got going on all these omic names. I think they could name a new omic name every week, it felt like. And the social scientists decided they were feeling left out, so they came up with their own omic names. But we recognize these, right? So, and nutrition, economy, your drug exposures, and then the socio-economic determinants, really. And I would start pointing some new ones that I'm known to do sometimes. By the way, it's just great words that go into this, but colonialism, racism. So this deeply informs a lot of my thinking. And our thinking as a research institute of how we move forward. There's systems of research, and this was one version of it. The learning health system is now embedded in the CSM strategy. So these are now broadly accepted concepts, which is incredibly exciting. So how do you go from deep knowledge of individual, data-driven discovery, innovation, knowledge translation, health systems intervention, and the cycle of impact? And when we had drafted this as Precision Health Alberta, we had dreamed of, could we do this as a learning health system across all of Alberta? All Albertans contributing to the future of our health. And there are countries that do this. The Scandinavian cultures, countries that have a very strong culture of, you receive and you return back as a participant in a public healthcare system. And that's not to say we don't have this culture here. We have a culture that also strengthens our privacy acts. But in a consented research environment, maybe under one child and one child, every child, or ACHRI or AHS, ACH, or child health community, we can think about a starting point that would start enabling this type of population-based research and a more systematic approach to addressing greater challenges. And we'll show you how we landed at least in one child every child. Okay, so if I go back and get my own teaching slides, then did I walk the talk on this stuff? And so in 2010, my teaching slides had this "My Genome, We Do It," and at the time it was, I will say, probably a bit controversial when you think that genetic information could create tendencies towards the personality or neurodevelopmental disorders or psychiatric illness, and those tendencies are real now and more accepted. And then, in 2018 and 2013, the conceptualization of this exact same slide, having a different bubble on top of it. These were always sitting on top. I wasn't showing them spread out. So I was reflecting across these opportunities. So intersectionality is a relatively newer term for me. I have a daughter who is in the Bachelor of Health Science in the Health and Society stream, and I asked her a while ago, what's intersectionality? She quickly explained it to me. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I've had other mentors who have done daughter did a good job, who have done a better job of helping me explain this or understand it. And I think the really neat thing is Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined this whole concept and has been a champion of it and a thought leader in this space, is going to be in Calgary in early March. She's speaking at the university and at the city of Calgary. And, this is, as far as I can tell, based on the reaction of our community, this is the rock star coming to visit us. So let's all join and meet with and listen to Kimberly. So this quote down here, I think, is powerful, and it describes this context of, the lens through which you can see where power comes into lines, where it locks and intersects. It's the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination and privilege. And at the presence of multiple single and sometimes multiple minority presences within intersectionality, positionalities, intersectional positionalities, shifts that balance and can shift it quite dramatically to a position of more discrimination and privilege. But they're all unique and we all have them. And so I took this on myself and okay, well, what do I have as my intersectionalities? And I've always known this, and I've been very aware of this for a long time. The male, white, heterosexual physician leaders, scientist, traveler, photographer are positionalities of privilege. Within the physician scope, I'd say I often felt at the bottom of that rung of the ladder, a rare disease physician who is dealing with, as I once heard, funny looking kids, and there's nothing you can do for them anyways. Those are incredibly harmful comments to a community of kids and families. And, I was trying to advocate for these in some of these scenarios. But again, the overall positionality is one of privilege for sure. Husband, father, for sure. I think positionality can be simplified sometimes through names, because there's lived experience sometimes behind all of these, and we all have them that provide significant reflection on who you are and what lens you bring to your physician's roles. So for me, my first child had a retinoblastoma. It was a cancer. Under a year of age, required at least 2 to 3 years of traveling back and forth between Calgary and Toronto for treatment. We were a young family in a city that we didn't have community, we didn't have family. Through those years, we also became very aware that our young child had significant neurodiversity issues, significant mental health issues that have turned out to be lifelong. We've watched that child thrive and at times struggle. Now as a young adult who's transgender, working in a world that even yesterday, if you watch the news, is not kind to the transgender community. And I will say is unlikely ever to come back as a professional to Alberta. And it's been a privilege to watch all of this, to be a supporter. I don't know what it's like to be transgender or neurodiverse or have mental health issues. I'm a parent of one, but it provides a lens and perspective to a lot of things I brood about. The other lens and perspective that I can own more directly is being a settler. This is a new concept for me. Michael Hart, not sure if Michael's on, but Michael Hart has just been an inspiring kind of teacher and mentor for many of us through our journey of writing One Child, Every Child, and thinking about how we need to identify and respect the concepts of being a settler, respecting the Indigenous populations, nations, scholars, communities. And we can't talk about one without the other. And I remember the side notes of our grant as we were writing it, you can't talk about the Indigenous path without acknowledging a settler and a settler path or non-Indigenous path or Mr. Coastwalk path. And you would read these and we're like, oh, but boy, oh boy, thick skulls, eventually you get there and you start realizing that we are on land that we are thriving on. And there are Indigenous peoples who have lost opportunity because of that. So at the center is interesting. I put moi, and in Calgary, it's very Anglophone in my communities, but deep down, obviously, I still have a positionality of that little Francophone boy. Okay, so leadership begins with knowing yourself, and I'm going to try and transition away from me fairly quickly now because I'm starting to squirm. I do know my profile. It is on the middle left of this scale. So listening, analytical, peacekeeping, calm, blue, green. But I shift to the right, so you can see me move into spaces. And so in other words, in many ways, I think I've been told that my profile is quite centered. It's felt to be a fairly flexible leadership style. It also means that if I need strengths in any of the deep areas across this, I need to go find those deep strengths in many different domains, and that's the importance of having a diverse leadership perspective. So these are my leadership styles. I think people who know me will probably add other things onto it. My weaknesses, you're not quite sure where to start with your thinking about your own weaknesses as a person, as a leader, as a professional. I won't get into spouses and relationships. I didn't ask my spouse what these were. But on a bad day, just look at what the opposite of your strengths are. And I've listed a few there. Unconscious bias we all have in you guys. They can be strong, they can be powerful. Bring them up into your cortex and bash them around. And don't let them sit at the deep part of your brain without acknowledging they're ruminating in there. Leadership tools, strategic planning, team building, mentorship, negotiation, conflict resolution, team building, communication, I think are all strengths. Leading an EDI culture, these are my EDI statements. I stand up to these, cisgendered, white, male with privilege, do not pretend to represent communities I'm not part of. I strive to be an honest, sincere, accountable. Take a screenshot of it, you guys who want to hold me accountable to this stuff. Take a screenshot, throw it back at me. But I think I can be an accountable ally to equity, deserving, and diverse members and partners. I need to and commit to avoid tokenism, diversifying the leadership voices of ACHRI and One Child, Every Child, and developing and enabling an EDI culture in ACHRI. So I can't define that EDI culture. I shouldn't be. We need diverse voices to do so. So this is the voice of Bukola Salami. And an EDI culture is based on trust, respect, reciprocity. Full as our ACHRI and EDI lead on one child, every child. The EDI action plan that's developed will be our North Star. It will inform our plan to go forward in developing this EDI culture of embedding EDI principles across our research ecosystem. And I would love to give the voice, and we'll find opportunity, and look forward to describe her wheel here, which she presented at the ACHRI retreat. I remembered her presenting it and wanted to bring it forward of what are the concepts and elements of equitable partnership and accountabilities, and there's powerful things in here. Okay, so finally the puffin. So fork in the road visually for me is quite powerful, and I paused, and I had to pause in this kind of question of leadership. And the pause is important. The pause allowed me to think about, am I personally ready? Am I personally committed? Am my family ready? Are my mentors ready to throw my hat in and want to lead ACHRI? And part of that also reflects, what does ACHRI need? Am I the right person, et cetera, et cetera. Search and selection committees get the final decision, and I deeply embed and believe the concepts of effective transition leadership processes that are in place in institutions like CSM. So we're in part of this process. But for me, without a doubt, if the puffin moves, and I've moved my own puffin, if the institution moves the puffin, then I'm ready to run. And I think this is just full heart commitment that we have an incredible opportunity together, that as a leader, I will play this insanely committed enabling role, not for me to succeed, for us to succeed. And so, I'm starting to run, and let's just kind of get through these steps. But this step of pausing, both for me personally and the institution pausing, is incredibly important in times of leadership transition. So, okay, I want to talk about ACHRI. So research institutes are here to serve the research needs of its membership, including training opportunities. And so ACHRI has a very, very diverse leadership core, 372 members, 500 trainees in its environment, and a significant amount of resources going to supporting those trainees. There are strengths in our research institute. And part of our strengths come from the diversity of our research community. So when Sousa Bensor, obviously our current director, and Benedict were working on developing their strategic plan on our behalf 5 years ago, Benedict did this incredible work at looking at the bibliometric analysis to try and understand and inform where our strengths were. That informs also where your opportunities lie. And so out of this incredible document that was our North Star for a while, became for sure the first, child health and wellness strategy at a university level, informed how we organized ourselves. It drove some growth. You can see the programs on the right. Everyone has seen these before. It also growth in kind of many of the metrics that we've been following over the years, including growth in our funding. So we've had a significant growth trajectory without a doubt. Our people, what continues to strike me and just really, really can't say this enough, is the strength of the core team that works every day in ACHRI. And you guys don't see them. You don't see them come in. You don't see them stay late. You don't see the work that goes behind creating communications teams, managing HR, finance, the teams that do strategic planning, that organize meetings, that organize the leadership team. They're just absolutely incredible. So if you look at the retreat that we held, the number of hours of work and effort and planning that go into that, and that's this team. So kudos to them. And then, research institutes and schools like ours, we live off the backs of scholars. We stand on you. We would love to have you stand on our backs, but the reality is we benefit from your success. So I like that perspective sometimes, and we need to acknowledge that. So then we have huge strength in our partners. So when I did our challenges, I wrote this one a long time ago. The first thing I put on our challenges was rapid growth. And I would think about some other ones. And then more recently, I was brooding, okay, well, what does rapid growth do to an organization? And I pulled this up and I was like, oh, wow, this is it. Like, this is exactly the struggles we're seeing. So if you look at the internal struggles, and maybe the whole organization, maintaining our organizational culture, naming and prioritizing our needs, internal communication, effective executive leadership and decision-making, preparation for leadership transitions and burnout. And then the systems level challenges are also very real. Increasing your research capacity, your human resource needs, HR, finance, all the things that enable all this stuff, but also your partnerships externally, your partnerships and relationships, all of them struggle when you have rapid growth. So I think this becomes part of our starting point of addressing our rapid growth and equilibrating in some ways our leadership core, our engagement strategies, internal and external. People are sure feeling we probably went silent. We did go silent because we're struggling with all of these things internally. So I think we're ready to rise back up and start saying, okay, we've had this period of rapid growth. We've had a lot of transition. Let's move this forward. Moving opportunity to impact is what keeps me up at night, and it will for a long time, is how do we go from the opportunities we have and driving the impact through our internal partnerships, our internal scientists, our relationships externally, and the opportunities through funding and partnership that we have, and then understanding roles and responsibilities. So how do we do identification of strategic priorities? I think you have to balance both. Okay, and I've been in a lot of these talks listening to leaders present, and often the emphasis is always on strategic alignment. What's our capacity, alignment between expertise and resources? What is the need that a proposal, a project, an infrastructure, a team, whatever you're talking about, and what is going to be the impact of that? And I think that the process of being clear on how you identify strategic priorities in an organization is really, really important. But I think we have to pause, and I'm doing so like openly in front of you today, and that your priorities in the moment that you get off this talk could well be to go back, and it's going to feel really distant from the strategic priorities of an organization. The next grant, that piece of equipment that's broken, the ethics that's stalled and you have to reapply, the finance that's not working, the contract you're trying to get through, your student who's worried, your staff people who are worried. Like, these are the day-to-day struggles of being an academic. The teaching slides you need to prepare, student is working on a thesis, they're worried about it. Like, these are the day-to-day priorities of our faculty. And so let's not forget those. Let's find a voice of leadership within ACHRI that can identify and respond to this combination of the need for strategic priorities and also working on your priorities. There are trends in science, and this list could be quite long. I'm not going to go through them one by one. I just listed them. You can brood through them. I do think we need, as an organization, to have our eye on these trends, and the ones that provide opportunity, but the ones that also provide threats. And one of them, maybe I will spend a little bit of time on it. The position of academic institutions in our society, the position of science in our society, the position of women and children in our society, and how do we become a voice in a setting that is finding harder and harder for us to have voices. And to me, that's by driving impact and being very clear on the value of science, including discovery science, of course, and right up to translational and society-focused impact, health-focused impact. But those headwinds, I think we have to be aware of, see what we can do. I would say there's opportunities in many of these trends for us, and let's try and harness those. The child health and wellness strategy, you guys know, so this is what I would say would be priority one. It's not run its course, you guys. This thing is still very active. It's still very real. It's still very relevant. I went back and looked at it. Tremendous amount of work went into this, and it's highly relevant in the context of social determinants, biological determinants in the middle of these kind of priority programs that are highly relevant to the landscape that we still operate in. So I will continue to prioritize and would propose to prioritize the child health and wellness strategy. Without a doubt, one child, every child. It's an enabling opportunity. And I'll show you later how I think one child, every child and the child health and wellness strategy can work together to co-enable each other. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Most of you have seen it. You don't know a lot about one child and every child, go look it up. But obviously, we're not happy with these downward trends. We should not be happy. We should be very aggressively reactionary to this type of stuff, and respond in terms of what we can do as a local community, a national, global community to address those trends. Our approach has been transdisciplinary from its inception, so identifying those biomedical social determinants, interventions that include everything from a community-based intervention to a gene therapy, so high precision medicine, to community-based interventions, and how do we understand which ones have the greatest impact, And how do we knowledge mobilize? How do we drive that? So the value, impact, and knowledge mobilization approaches to our science. And I'll come back to that one in a second. You've all seen this research framework, I think. But what I want to highlight here is what were identified as initial grand challenges were never meant to be the final grand challenges for the 7 years of the program. So the first theme focused on fetal growth, the second theme on chronic illness, medically complex illness, rare diseases, the third theme on neurodiversity, mental health. Some of those may remain as the grand challenges, but we should be thinking about conceptualizing and dreaming and thinking about where biggest impact would occur if we were to create new grand challenges. What would those look like? How would we have capacity and impact along that framework of opportunity? And then leverage what will stay across the grant are our accelerators, Indigenous ways of knowing, the equity, diversity, inclusion, the training programs, the comprehensive data platforms, the technology solutions, this impact evaluation and knowledge mobilization accelerator. This one is difficult to follow, but it shows a lot of things. One, the embeddedness of the parallel paths underneath all of this. So an Indigenous path and non-Indigenous path, and where do we come together to work together? Particularly to have autonomy of the Indigenous path, to have their own priorities led by Indigenous scholars, but also to float the whole boat by having an Indigenous accelerator that can help non-Indigenous scholars and path priorities be available and amenable and focused on in an appropriate way if it's a linked priority with Indigenous communities and scholars. And what are the needs and capacities and understandings that we need to have in place before we can start doing this? So we can accelerate Indigenous priority research through the overall research enterprise of One Child, Every Child, and I will say also of ACHRI. Okay, measuring impact's powerful. We have 51 metrics in 6 domains that we need to report on, but we need to focus on what are the key measures of, sorry about that, losing my voice, but research outcomes and innovation as a research institute and the opportunity of One Child, Every Child to drive that forward. And I would say actually this all will spin out and have impacts nationally and globally. So this work is all tremendously important. We don't own training programs as a research institute. We should try to own training programs. There is a mechanism through graduate education, postgraduate education offices, and a reporting mechanism that governs these programs, but we're a training enabler. We can enable training through funding mechanisms, through enhanced opportunities for our scholars to co-develop with our trainees what would enhance their training environment. And we have training grants that do that on the right. There's powerful, they're incredible opportunities. And in One Child, Every Child, and in ACHRI, and our new training leads are committed to think about what would an innovative curriculum look like and co-develop that. Frida, you guys, you're all fantastic. I think you hosted the most amazing poster session at our retreat. Never seen a poster session that felt so engaging with students and scholars just really looking at their science. And it was so diverse. You could go from a gene therapy to a community-based solution in the same room and cross-talking. So kudos to you as a group. 4, as a priority, we have partnerships. Children's Hospital, obviously, and ACHF, and I'll come back to those partnerships in the university. But we have major partnerships nationally and globally. ACHF, please go look at their report to the community. If you're not aware of what this does, what this organization does for our clinical care and our research, it's absolutely stunning. And it's more than just funding. They're an organization that's very thoughtful about their alignment of impact, of opportunity, a voice to the community, a sounding board in the community. And boy, they put their money where their mouth is in terms of what they fund. And so we're just so privileged, I will say, as a research institute to have this incredible partnership. CSM and UC have just launched strategic plans. I've looked at both of them. There's significant intersection between them. We are members of CSM, I would say, as a research institute, and we're in the broader context of Ahead of Tomorrow, which is the university strategic plan. And you can stare at the middle of these. You can look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, go to the websites. We will co-enable success of our partners here. But also I hear from both the university and CSM questions of, how can we help? How can we work together? Which is incredibly exciting. We have community partners, we have global partnerships, they're all strengths for us. We will need as a priority to action our EDI plan and walk parallel paths together. You've heard me speak about this. Scale and spread research capacity. So, and this is how people are currently, and I can understand why, looking at us from either an internal perspective or an external perspective, is that we have one child, every child teams and accelerators, and then we have the child wellness programs and platforms. How do these work together? You know, am I part of one camp or the other camp? Am I part of both camps? Do I feel excluded? Do I feel included? And I completely understand where that comes from. Really, really do. But let me propose something that feels a bit different. And I think this is how we'd always conceptualize one child, every child, and ACHRI working together. We're codependent, we're co-embedded for enabling each other's success. And so I would say we should be thinking about research programs and themes as things that are linear across, and they will change. They have priorities. Some of them are one child or child enabled, some are child wellness enabled. It doesn't matter. And then we have programs and we have platforms and accelerators that could be strengths that were pre-existing one child, every child. Of course, we have lots of them, lots of programs that were strengths. We got the grant because we have strength. But let's not divide these things. Let's co-embed them. BioCore, a research platform. We're pre-existing. They will shift up and help one child, every child. The things that we're doing one child, every child will scale and spread down across the whole research institute, training programs, EDI philosophies, ability to engage and perform and enable research that's Indigenous-led, clinical trial platforms that we can enable. The things that we can enable across this really are going to be empowering for the whole research institute. And I think there's a broader perspective. So I don't want to divide these things up. They're all deeply embedded together. They're all deeply embedded in overall floating our ship of research enterprise and training. And I think we can do the same nationally. I think we can look at our research environment and look at, you know, erase UC and erase kind of one child, every child, and look at how do you embed research as a national program, a national platform? Where can we lead up front? Where we sit side by side? Where can we sit underneath? And I think that's the perspective you need to take as we look at going out to the national environment, saying what are the priorities in child health? How could we enable that? How do our research environments across different research institutes, community partners, Children's Healthcare Canada, Indigenous partners, like how do we work together to kind of align this? And I think we can bring a national vision of how this research works. And you know, I was going to be bold, put a globe underneath this, but let's just stop it kind of, you understand the concept. We're in the planning phases. I'm just about done of an ACH Center for Innovative Care that's going to sit behind the Children's Hospital. This is going to be a transformational opportunity, but we have to think about what that means. What is it to have a hub that does research in a way that's embedded with clinical care, spreading out the care research environment across the whole site, as a hub that stands out the Health Sciences Center, to main campus, communities? What do those spaces look like? What are the programs that we're in? How we're colliding people into this space? But let's not wait for the building. Let's take those concepts and enable them now as a research ecosystem. And then we're ready to sort of transport them in a sense into a new space once it's available. But let's start building the concepts of what we want to do now. And that's going to inform what the building will look like. But planning is going to be a priority for us with our partners, obviously, Alberta Health Services and the government, ACHF playing a major leadership role right now, and we're appreciative of that. Okay, our leadership list is day one of Joanne Wenig's executive director position. Joanne comes to us having just been the chief operating officer at the Virgin Healthful Foundation, and say just is a major role, just in time frame, not in scope and scale. And that was a major role in the organizational running of ACHF, but also in strategic planning, partnership, development. And many of us have worked with Joanne and have realized just the tremendous thoughtfulness that she brings to her approach, the principled approach to leadership. And that's on the background of major experience in strategic planning and project management with many of the organizations that we're talking about, you know, the University of Calgary, Alberta Health Services, government, community partners. So congratulations. We're working on the formal announcement, watch for it, read about it, and just be a tremendous enabler of ACHRI. Scientific director Susan Bensler, you know, just tremendous effort and work, commitment, heart and soul into this place. But there's obviously a role for a scientific director in institutes. They're important. If I were in the role, I would envision a description of a scope around overall direction, strategic planning, partnerships, and enabling success, because we have a lot of leaders in our group. The Deputy Director, Benedict Talbinson, would continue on in the role, and asked him if he would do that if I were the director, and he's agreed. And I think just such a brain around how do we think about our organization, how do we drive science and the partnerships and enabling, obviously, child health and wellness, and then child every child. So tremendous enabler. And then lots of scientific directors and program leads, theme leads, accelerator leads. If you don't know these folks, I didn't want to go through them one by one, not doing justice by putting their pictures up. They're all incredibly committed to your leadership. But also, some of them have been here for several years since the child health and wellness strategy was crafted. I think it's time to refresh those, at least in conversations. Are they committed? Do they want to continue? But more importantly, what's the role of these things? You saw my embedded figure. You know, what's the role of scientific directors and program leads and accelerator leads? And I've heard from many of them saying, can we just get clarity, not kind of ministerial letters on direction? But, I know people are looking for that. Okay. Members thriving, you know, need to walk the talk on this stuff. You know, culture of wellness, valuing each other, breaking down barriers, and enabling that healthy research ecosystem. We will develop a 30-60-day plan. It's in process already. Accelerating our science, understanding and aligning our capacity, shaping and strengthening our partnerships. And then, you know, then we'll basically, that's an action plan. It's not a strategic planning exercise, it's an action plan. And then hopefully we'll be able to move forward. Onward together, these are the outputs that we can have. I'm tremendously excited for them. Okay, so back to the question, if you had your QR code open, open it up. But I want us to think about, to whom are we accountable? And yes, there will be a debate here between who wins between Sparky and Todd. But it's a thought-provoking exercise, actually, as a research institute. So, and as a researcher, as a trainee, is to whom are we accountable? So if you can pull that up, maybe we'll circulate I'll leave the Menti survey open for maybe 24 hours or so, and we'll circulate the code, and you can go in and you can answer 3 times. So just go in and populate this thing, and I'll return it back to you. Okay. And I'm sure you're going to come up with lots of things that are not represented in these photos. So the last time I asked our membership Menti version question was at the ACHRI retreat, and I asked, what are your hopes for the future? And this is what you responded, right? This is not me, this is you, this is the culture that we have, these are the aspirations we have, and I think they're incredibly aspiring. So thanks, and let's get to questions.
Thank you so much. So we have one question that was put into the chat room by Dr. Kellner. Thank you for your presentation, Francois. There are a lot of priorities between ACHRI and OCEC, as well as lots of fundamental activities and programs that aren't necessarily current top priorities. What will be your approach to prioritizing priorities and to supporting other activities, programs, and people?
Yeah, so I think the short-term priorities are around those initial organizational challenges. So if you're looking at 30, 60-day, 90-day plans, and I think everyone understood that now, we need to start addressing those. And then the fundamental activities and programs that aren't necessarily currently top priorities. So I think that's that question of balance between strategic planning, but also we have a broad membership. And there needs to be a perspective that allocation of resources is balanced across those. And you know, in a broader institute like ours, I think you have to balance it this 50-50 type of level. You know, we're strategic, but we're also enabling. But also when you're doing things strategic in terms of, and you saw my boxes, I think you have to think about the impact of that strategic planning, and that impact is not just external impacts, it can be internal impacts. So if you're saying we're going to fund a clinical trial platform because that's a priority for a group, well, is that scalable to other groups, and how do you enable that type of work? And then I don't think we have a robust process, but I'm going to develop one. We don't have a scientific committee. We have lots of programs and we have a lot of people who come to meetings, but I don't see a place where ideas are brought forward and chewed on in a systematic way. And I think that's part of our growth thing. You know, we're focused on one child, every child autism. I think that's the second approach is how do you have a robust place for new ideas to be brought forward and chewed on? Outside of, can I submit a proposal? You know, where was opportunity building occur?
Okay, thank you. So I just clicked on the Q&A thing there, and it says the host has turned that off. So please just type your questions in the chat if there are any. Or if you don't want to type and you want to speak up, we can probably make that work too. We have about 5 minutes for questions left. It's early morning, people are tired. Well, if I don't hear anything else, I mean, we had a very comprehensive presentation, so maybe there are no questions because everything was answered. And so with that being said, I'd like to thank Dr. Bernier for sharing his vision with us. Thank you all for attending. Again, in the chat, the feedback form is attached, so just pull it down from there, send it to my assistant Jennifer, and she will then anonymize it and we'll make a package out of all of the responses to go to the search and selection committee. So with that being said, again, have a wonderful afternoon, morning and afternoon, and
thanks everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.